Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name's Councillor Chris Rigby and I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. Before we get started, can I just go to Sarah from Democratic Services for some housekeeping, please?
Thank you. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building in Bourne Avenue. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And just to come straight back to you, have we got any apologies for this evening?
Apologies received from Councillor Ricketts and Councillor Clements.
Great, and there's no substitutions as I understand.
No, Chair.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Next is item 3. So just to ask if any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other interests on any items on the agenda tonight. Councillor Gibbs.
My company uses BCP waste for clearing, but I've checked it with Robin Whitwatson and he's quite happy provided we don't discuss pricing.
Great, thank you very much. And item number 4 is the minutes of the last meeting. Is everyone happy to approve those? See any dissent? So we can move on from that. And that takes us on to item number 5, which is public issues. We've got 2 public questions this evening and 3 statements, and they are all from Mr. Paul Brailsford. So Mr. Brailsford, if you can come and take a seat and ask your first question. I believe Councillor Hadley, you'll be answering these for us.
So good evening, Chair, Committee, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute this evening. It's nice to get here in person. If I could just give a quick introduction of myself before I ask my question. I'm Paul Brailsford. I'm a local resident in Bearwood. I am also a co-lead of Magwatch, which is a local residents group committed to protecting green spaces in the areas of Camford Magna, Merley, Oakwood and Bearwood. And we have a Facebook membership of over 1,400. So I'm here to ask some questions on behalf of that group this evening.
Great, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
And then, yeah, if you want to ask your first question, then we'll stop and get it answered and then go on to the second one and then your statements.
Yep, my first question. So I'm pleased to see that the packaging extended producer responsibility under the producer pays principle, together with the profit from BCP's commercial waste collections, has reduced the council's waste expenditure from 36.7 million to 17.3 million, a net reduction of £19.4 million. However, was the strategy, or this is my question, was the strategy analysis extended to consider longer term benefits of reinvesting part of that net saving into developing new local recycling infrastructure? Such investment could accelerate BCP's transition to a circular economy, create sustainable green jobs, support climate objectives, reduce the carbon footprint and generate further economic value that would in turn benefit both BCP's finances and the environment.
Thank you. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your question. All services in Bournemouth Questions Pool Council are expected to minimise their net impact on council tax through fees and charges where appropriate. And the net reductions you mentioned includes £10 million, which is not just commercial income, but also includes the waste in, like garden waste and other chargeable services and subscriptions, and the sale of other types of household waste. And that figure is not a new figure, is what we get each year. And it's always been included in the waste management budgets, which reduces the overall net expenditure of the waste service and so the costs of the taxpayer. The only recent new income has been the extended producer responsibility, which you mentioned, a payment of 9.4 million in the year 2025-6, which is a new government tax on the packaging industry. The payment is intended under producer pays principle to make the packaging industry pay for the collection and disposal of existing packaging waste rather than this falling to the council taxpayer. If the policy is successful and works as intended, producers and retailers will seek to minimise their packaging, and we will see a reduction of this tax in income on year on year as the packaging reduces or is switched to more recyclable materials, which is beneficial, but it doesn't keep that money coming in. If any new facilities are required in the future by the council to manage its waste, a separate business case and financial case will have to be developed with associated funding agreed by councillors. Given the scale of our waste streams and the shifting global market for recyclers, it's unlikely that the council could create a facility itself to be at scale economically sustainable. We do have plans, though, to extend the new TU facility to divert the reusable items from the waste stream and enhance that. There's still an awful lot of uncertainty in the UK waste industry, as several new government policies have not yet started, and the impact of them on how we currently operate our waste services and any future requirements is still not fully known. We know we will have to introduce new or amended services to increase our recycling rate to 65%, but these will be evaluated as we go. We're currently monitoring the new deposit return scheme in 2027 and the emissions trading scheme for energy waste for waste facilities in 2028. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to go on to your second question, Mr. Brosford.
Yep. So the communities of Bearwood and Merley are among the most affected by waste management operations, given the concentration of the activities at Camford Resource Park. The intensification of waste processing adjacent to internationally designated environmental and ecological sites are of particular concern. Residents also experience health and well-being impacts linked to traffic, pollution, odour, noise and other nuisances. Were the local impacts considered as part of the strategy review, and were any representations or concerns raised specifically on behalf of Bearwood and Merley residents by their ward councillors?
Thank you. And back to you again, Councillor Hadley, for the response, please.
Thank you, Chair. This document was that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is looking at tonight is a high-level strategy document that discusses the principles on how we will manage our waste and the infrastructure that may be required over the next 10 years and beyond. The document is designed to show how we will meet our environmental and carbon reduction targets and any supporting actions that we can progress following the public consultation. There are currently waste treatment facilities, waste transfer stations and waste depots across the BCP area. This waste strategy does not look at individual sites, as our requirements will be subject to market forces, to availability and to capacity when procuring future services. You mentioned the circular economy in your prior question. The strategy does emphasise the importance of the circular economy and the hierarchy of reduce, reuse, repair, repurpose and recycle before energy from waste or from landfill. We must also record and report the distances our waste travels as part of the authority's carbon dioxide footprint. If any local sites are required to meet the goals identified in the strategy and currently do not have Environmental Agency permits to operate, as with all large changes to services, strategies and policies, they will be agreed by councillors through the normal democratic process. The jointly prepared Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole and Dorset Waste Plan 2019 identifies sites for new waste management facilities to meet the county's needs. It provides the policy framework for determining planning applications for waste management facilities up to 2033. Any new facility would need agreement through the planning process and the Environment Agency in the normal way. The waste strategy was discussed in an all-member briefing in May 2025, and it was available for public consultation for 4 weeks in June 2025. The waste strategy alongside the consultation fundings were then discussed with and later commented on by a members' cross-party waste strategy group in October 25. The issues pertaining to Bearwood and Merley are specific to the private facilities there. Ward councillors have been actively supporting the concerns of the community on the planning application, but it's a planning matter and a separate issue to the overall strategy that we're discussing tonight. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you want to go on to your three statements and just go one after the other, if that's all right.
Will do. Thank you, Chair. So the 2019 BCP and Dorset Waste Plan is based on data from 2015. That data is now outdated and superseded by actual data since 2019, which has demonstrated that the waste plan forecasting is significantly inaccurate. Moreover, the draft strategy articulates England's management of waste is undergoing transformational change at the national level to create a circular economy. In this context, assumptions and decisions for any waste management strategies or developments through to 2033 would be at significantly undue risk of failure if based against out-of-date and inaccurate waste forecasts from the 2019 Waste Plan. We would urge this committee to satisfy itself that all future waste management planning, contracts, infrastructure are based against the most recent data available and take into account the recent national level waste reduction measures. It would also be beneficial to publish waste data information and waste strategy targets on the BCP website. Many of BCP's waste management contracts expire in 2027. Whilst it's recognised the changing landscape of waste management is challenging and presents risk, it is also an opportunity. The committee should be satisfied that the strategy's vision is bold enough to ensure future contracts will be designed and sufficiently robust enough to achieve the ambitions of a circular economy. Procurement processes will, of course, seek best economic value, but the strategy must go much further to meet its ambition. I would urge the committee to explore whether the BCP is in a position to leverage the circular economy opportunities and what the strategy needs to consider to be in a position to leverage the best outcome from future contracts. This will be an important point given the refresh of the medium-term financial plan due next year. And finally, the strategy must support climate and ecological emergency policies and the circular economy whilst moving waste up the hierarchy beyond both landfill and incineration, both of which are linear and not circular waste disposal treatments. The strategy narrative is not balanced in this respect. It rightly promotes waste diversion from landfill, but fails to promote waste diversion from incineration where possible. Both are equally harmful options, as incineration destroys recoverable resources, with up to 51% of our residual waste stream being recyclable. Waste incineration is also known to be harmful to recycling and is also the dirtiest form of power generation in the UK. To not address this imbalance sends the wrong message to the public about BCP's ambition to achieve a circular economy. We hope that BCP will recognise this waste strategy represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to be bold in its vision and to create a sustainable circular economy. Thank you, Chair, Committee.
Thank you very much for bringing that to us. And John, we always appreciate it when we get residents, members of the public, and particularly those representing groups who want to come and engage with us. And while we can't give you direct answers to the statements, I'm sure it'll come up in the debate tonight and members of the committee will pick up on a few of those issues.
Perfect.
So
thank you all very much.
Okay, so we've got item number 6, which is the Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report, but I'm going to ask the committee if they are happy for us to take item number 6 and move it down the agenda and have that just before the work plan, item number 9, so we can move straight into the waste strategy now. Is everyone content with that? Okay. Great, thank you. In which case, we'll take the waste strategy for Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole 2026 to 2036, and the paper is going to be introduced by Councillor Hadley and also some of our officers, Georgina Fry, I believe. If you want to come and join us. And yeah, Councillor Hadley, are you introducing this? Yep, so over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an important time, as we've already heard through these questions and statements from the member of the public, in terms of uncertainty for nationally in terms of the waste streams and as we go forward. So it's an important time to lay out our strategy and try and work out how we deal with things for the next 10 years, which this paper does. The government target set, we currently recycle about 43.9% of our waste. The target is for 65% by 2035 and for less than 10% to go to landfill. And we have about 165,000 tonnes of waste from 189,000 homes within BCP. So we're talking big numbers, and that's big piles of waste down each of the waste streams that we have to deal with. So the paper talks around those things, what we know, some of the stuff we don't know in terms of things like particularly the glass deposit scheme is not yet announced in detail and has been somewhat deferred. We do have to look at food waste in the pool area, which hasn't had it, and we've been holding off on the basis of the national reforms coming in, but also at flats across BCP, and indeed at participation amongst the public in Bournemouth and Christchurch. So a bit of a push on trying to ensure that food waste goes there, and obviously that goes to active digestion within Dorset and energy and also onto the land. We've also got to collect plastic film by 2027 and separate paper and cardboard, or consider how or whether we separate paper and cardboard. That is the recommendation from government. We have had some money to help us to do that. We've had £1.5 million in capital, which is particularly to help us to buy extra lorries for the fleet to be able to handle the volume of food waste, and a revenue sum. And as has already been mentioned, we've had an injection of money around the extended producer responsibilities for packaging, which is also to help us with that. The paper talks in terms of half of the waste in black bins being possible to be recycled. That's in the residual waste being possible to be recycled and not being recycled currently. If we could get that into the recycle bins, then we think that would be about an 8% increase in our recycling rate, and save us about £1 million a year. If we're successful in getting people to adopt and use the food waste in pool and in flats, that's another 7% from the residual waste. So those are important facets of it. The paper also talks about batteries, and we have had a scheme to try and encourage people to put batteries out with their waste on top of the bin in clear plastic bags to be collected. We do have a problem with fires, and we have had fires which we think are down to batteries in about 5 lorries, and also 3 in the recycling centres. So the handling of batteries is a problem for us, and a serious problem of fire, particularly the one at the Herne transfer station was quite a serious fire and put us out of action for a little while. We need to work on that, but the recommendation is to actually remove the curbside recycling facility for batteries, because there are lots of shops that sell batteries that you can recycle them at, and actually it's not very well used. So the alternative to that would be to heavily publicise and try and ramp it up. But there are challenges for the teams in terms of people putting the bags inside the bin instead of on top of the bin, and also how they get handled and taken back to the depot and dealt with. So that's the recommendations.
Thank you. Georgina, anything you want to add at this time, or?
Yeah, I would echo the sentiments. Thank you for the summary. This waste strategy is an overarching strategic pathway for progressing our waste services over the next decade. We are prioritising our focus on waste reduction, reuse, improving our recycling services to help divert waste from the rubbish bin and help achieve our recycling and landfill diversion targets, as well as reviewing our waste infrastructure and disposal. We've talked about the considerable change that's underway. So we have tried with the government's approach to waste management. So we have tried to have flexibility in the strategy, but provide direction and our intentions to support the tendering of our major waste disposal contracts, which are due in the next few years. There has been a fair amount of member engagement in the strategy development. We've had a full members working briefing group in May, and then a cross-party working group in October. And we are planning to use this group to help go forward to shape our supporting actions into fruition in the future. Apart from the batteries, there is no policy or service change progressed from the supporting actions of the waste strategy right now. They will all be subject to further detailed financial and performance modelling before being presented separately for decision.
Great, thank you. Ian, you okay? Okay, members, I can throw it open to you if anyone wants to get started. Otherwise, Councillor Dalton Gibson getting in there just before me.
Yes, I was just looking at the contamination of the recycling bin, I was surprised to see in things that were considered a contaminant other metals. I would have thought pretty much all metals were recyclable. So I just wondered what is there that's
Yeah, so in the curbside bin, it's packaging that we want for recycling. So the tins, the cans, and foil, aluminium foil. So other parts of other metal objects wouldn't necessarily be recycled in the curbside bin. If you have items like that, they can be taken to the recycling centres where they're recycled.
It's not uncommon to get things like vehicle parts deposited.
the other question I wanted to ask was actually on the rubbish bin, and we've got 38% of that is food waste. What impact do we think bringing pool in? I'm assuming that's across the conurbation, so it's boosted because we're not collecting poo. What do we expect that 38% to change by when we collect pools?
That's a really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how it pans out. We're anticipating a 7% diversion into the recycling rate. That's what's been modelled, and that's what we've used.
You okay with that?
Yes,
Councillor Moriarty.
Thank you. And this is more about the batteries. I absolutely appreciate the reason that we can't continue what's been happening with the fires, etc. I have some concerns, though, about people who aren't very mobile. And actually, a lot of people, elderly people, use batteries quite a lot. We have a Sharps scheme that actually Sharps can be left out. Is there any way of supporting people who are perhaps not so mobile to make sure that they can recycle their batteries? Because if they can't, they will just end up putting it in the rubbish anyhow. And that's, from an equality perspective, that's a bit of a...
Georgina, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, so we haven't looked at separate collections for batteries similar to Sharps, but it's on the basis that there are a lot of drop-off points across the conurbation. So in all small shops, so corner shops, there's 50 plus, and there's a helpful website that you can put your address into, and it'll show very locally where your locust drop-off point would be. We did talk about it with the equality panel, and we were talking about storing up batteries safely at home in a small Tupperware box or something like that until you could get out and about, and they are easily to transport. They're not bulky or big, so they could be carried out relatively easily. So yeah.
Thank you. Could I just add, if that's okay? So batteries, yes, they are quite portable, but there are quite a few people out there who really can't get out of their homes at all. So was that considered in terms of?
I think, Councillor, that the principle is that when batteries expire, they need to be replaced. So at the point where they're going to repurchase batteries, that's when they return the old ones.
So with regard to kind of Amazon or wherever they get their batteries from, kind of, shopping online, is there any way of asking the supermarkets or to actually take them away? Because there are a lot of people who, because they're not mobile at all, do online stuff and they really do not get out at all.
We can certainly do some research into postal schemes for batteries, but my understanding is that the supermarkets, as they sell them, they provide an in-house take-back scheme. So it's, any supermarket will have a drop-off point. If they sell over 19 kilos of batteries per annum, they have to provide a drop-off point. So yeah, that was as far as we've gone with it.
Just sticking on the batteries for a moment, because I know there's two separate things. If we get all the battery questions out the way to start with, and then we can move on to the rest of it. With the fires that have been caused, obviously it's a issue that I think there was, what do you say, is it 5 truck fires and 1 at the depots, which has happened?
So there's one major one at Herne, but there's also been 3 at Nuffield.
Okay.
So this year.
So those fires, obviously, as I understand it at the moment, when the batteries are collected, they're put into a separate storage container on the side of the truck, and then they're not chucked in with the general waste. So how many of those fires related to batteries which have been in the battery storage bit, and how many have been related to people just chucking them in the bin?
It's not to do with the separate batteries on the vehicle. It's to do with the fact that batteries are put in the recycling bin or in the rubbish bin. And it's a confusing message is what we're being told, that actually we're saying to people, put your batteries out with your recycling bin in a clear bag, put them on top of your bin, and people are thinking that they can recycle them in the recycling bin. And yeah, it's a really widespread problem across the country. And when we've had fires at the tramway stations and in vehicles, we call out the fire brigade, and they try and find the cause, and that's what they've suggested each time, that it is a result of batteries. But yeah, they are seeing it across the country and are very keen to do some communications about banning batteries from bins. And actually, there are lots of places that they can be just recycled. So that should be sort of the message that we're pushing.
Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, I think it also extends when you think of DIY items or laptops that have bigger batteries. And so there's something about having a consistent, clear message. We're going to have to do a lot of messaging around the food waste and the other changes to waste. So we need to have a clear and simple message for the public on all the waste streams as much as possible. So I think that this is a part of that wider piece, and the scale of the batteries. It's a bit like with disposable barbecues. That's the other cause of fires in our recycling centre or in the lorry sometimes is disposable barbecues that weren't properly extinguished. But these have been traced, as far as we know, to batteries.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I was driving towards, that it's going to have to be a communication strategy, because I did anticipate that it was just going to be coming from bins, and as well, possibly the throwing away of disposable vapes just in street bins or wherever people chuck them. I know that the disposable vapes have been banned now, but only theoretically, as they're still cheap enough that people do just buy and chuck them away after a night out, something like that. So I'm unsure is what I'm probably getting at, in that will not collecting batteries reduce the impact of fires if the collection of the batteries isn't the issue? It's batteries being disposed of in a certain way, and how that messaging directly ties into it. I don't need a response for it, it's just something I'm playing around in my head. Councillor Gillett, I had you next.
I won't take up too much time, because it's a lot of the very similar to what you were saying there, because the fires are still going to happen if it's not communicated in the way that people are putting batteries into their main bins, and batteries are now banned. People aren't aware of that, which obviously they aren't currently. None of this is going to potentially stop any fires. Almost the easiest way to stop that would be to isolate the batteries. But I think it overlaps. There was one other very quick thing. It was actually just come back on Anne Moriarty's point there. I found that there is a company called, I think it's called Valpack. That's off from memory. I only did this afternoon, so I should know. And they actually have a free box service. Yeah, so you just order a bunch of boxes and you put all your batteries in and you stick it in the post, and they don't charge you for that. So almost, do we need to advertise those sorts of things to people so that they are aware that they don't need to be, setting fire to lorries? They can just put it all in this free box that they get and post it off, because that's quite a useful complementary service to what we're trying to provide.
Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, obviously we don't want them setting fire to lorries, but actually it's also about recycling, because there are valuable materials in the batteries. So obviously if we can direct them to those sorts of services, or they go back to the shops to be recycled, then that's about minimising the waste, but actually recycling the materials, which means they're not having to be remined.
Just one last question from that. Is there a way that we, as part of the waste strategy, can encourage or in some way get places like pubs and bars more involved for vapes getting rid of, and provide something to them, not just corner shops? I'm just trying to think of more places where people are throwing away batteries now, that it's not just out of your telly remote, it's stuff that you're carrying around every day, and to divert them, because obviously the fires cost huge amounts of not just money, but facilities, time, bin collections, everything like that. Just other ways we can get this messaging out and get ways that these can be recycled into more spaces, so that people know where they can take them, and it's not just when they go to the supermarket, it's just wherever they might be.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, it's a good idea, and we recycle vapes at our recycling centres, and we've been really surprised by how many we're getting in. So people are storing them up and bringing them into the recycling centre. So I definitely think there are people that want to do the right thing with them, aren't there? So as many drop-offs as we can is a good thing. That we are aware of Alpac. My understanding was that the send back was for businesses. But yeah, if it's for individual people as well, then we can do further research into that.
Amazon run one, sorry, I don't get a hand up. Amazon run one as well through a company called Landbell, but I trying to work out if it was completely free for everything. But so that Amazon have got one as well, and you can do that through the things called Amazon boxes, you know, in the back of a petrol station. But obviously hubs would be more convenient for me.
Okay, are we content on batteries, or Councillor Goodall? No, if you want to ask something, you go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to have a ponder, if that's all right, but it was picking up on a point you made about not quite sure what I mean. But it's just that when we consult, whether it's about town councils or closing gates or what have you, and we've had a consultation on our waste disposal, it's how few people actually take part in it, and how, as a result, because forgive me, and you know what you're talking about, but a lot of us don't. And even in our household, I talk to my wife quite frequently about the issue of metals was raised, for example. So you go, can I put this one in? There's the issue of plastics and heavy plastics, which is, so plastics goes into the bin, but if you take a heavy plastic up to the recycling centre, it's not used, or rather it's not recycled. I think it goes to landfill. And I did beg the question of an officer up there a couple of years ago about that. She said, you'll have to raise that elsewhere, it's above my pay grade, which was fair enough at the time. But I did wonder with the things like the DRS scheme, is whether or not, if you're going to have a DRS scheme, whether that could be extended to business sites as well, so that not only do you have small things like aluminium and plastic containers and that, small plastic containers and that, which people get deposit back, but whether that can be applied to some of our business as well, so that this is a very bad example, but you might get a bucket, so a bucket can be recycled with the business from where it was bought, like Screwfix or something like this, because it's obviously going to be, it appears to me anyway to be a problem. But thank you.
Do you want to respond to that at all? Or?
Well, only that there is the waste electrical responsibilities are around sort of but it's a national thing. I don't think it's something we can do in isolation. We'd have to rely on government, and that's part of the simpler recycling is about having a simpler message. So when you move into a different area, you've not got to learn a whole new set of rules. And that's one of the challenges with the current system, that, you know, what we do, you Forest might do different, Dorset might do differently. And as you move around, you see a different set of rules. So I think part of the intent nationally is to simplify it. I don't know whether we're on a forum where we can sort of feed up some of those ideas. But I think industry, obviously the other part of that is commercial waste is commercially done. We don't have the responsibility directly for collecting that waste. They have to get into a commercial relationship either with us or with another waste provider. And again, something that is recyclable, if they're using a lot of them, there's probably value to that business in finding somewhere that's going to pay them to take the stuff away rather than just chucking it. And so encouraging that sort of behaviour is also important.
You'll forgive me, I did have it on my list to ask whether it was a national problem or whether it was a local problem.
Okay, batteries, I think we might be done. And what I'm going to suggest is if we just stop here, and we've got option 1 and option 2 in the paper to recommend the removal of curbside battery collections, or option 2 to continue. I'm going to make a recommendation that I've just sort of jotted down from what we've said, which is to support option 1, but to add in another point in it, which is to develop a convenient battery recycling scheme with local businesses to create more easily accessible drop-off points, which I think covers Councillor Moriarty's point about things being close enough for people to get to on that mobile. covers working on something with local businesses, pubs, whatever it may be, and it's just as a suggestion to add into there. So I'll look for someone to second that. Councillor Gillett, and if we can just have a show of hands on whether we'd support that as a committee. Is that unanimous? Great, thank you. Okay, moving on to the rest of the waste strategy then. Has anyone got any further questions on that or points they want to bring up? Or I will while we're here and while you're all thinking. Food waste collections, as well as pool, there's a mention of it expanding to flats as well. And I want to talk about flats more in general, because I think that's a lot of the places where there's more waste contamination from my own experience of living in flats and blocks of flats. And I was just wondering what the strategy is going to be to add food collection to blocks of flats without attracting rats to the collection areas more so than where they already are. And also communication to stop the contamination of the recycling. Because one thing I know a lot is recycling being put in plastic bags and then thrown into the recycling. And actually the recycling's pretty good, but it's that additional level of contamination. So just what's the plan around that?
So with the rollout of food waste, we are doing that from next April. It will be to all pool, but also to all flat properties. So that includes all of the flats in Bournemouth that don't currently have food waste collections. The plan is to provide a shared wheelie bin to those properties that can accommodate it, and the caddies for all the individual flats. There is a communications campaign planned with our corporate team, which will involve communications targeted specifically at flats, and I think that is going out early in the new year. The idea is to often legally we have to do it under the Environment Act, but the idea is there's a lot of flat properties, there's a lot of people that live in flats, and to give them the same opportunities that we have at the curbside for households. We do have problems with contamination with shared bins, and that has been overcome sort of nationally and to a degree locally with sort of engagement with getting residents on board, providing them with information, providing them with what should and shouldn't go in the bin, and the rationale for why it's the right thing to do. But it does rely to a degree on residents also being proactive and doing the right thing. With regard to the rat comment, actually food waste is a weekly collection, whereas currently we offer it's alternate weekly collections of rubbish and alternate weekly collections of recycling. In some flat properties, we obviously do have more regular collections than that because they don't have the capacity. But as a rule, a weekly collection of food should hopefully reduce down the likelihood of attracting vermin and odours and the rest of it, because we are having a more regular collection, and you are taking that section out of the waste stream for the other bins as well. So.
Thank you. And just going on the food as well, one of the complaints I have fairly regularly from residents in my own ward is that when the food collections are done, obviously the little caddies come back damaged. They've been put in the bin, as I think we say you can put them in the bin and hang them over the edge, but when they do that, they tend to come back and either get chucked in because they've not been noticed or come back with lids missing and things like that. So is there just a way that that's going to improve as we go into this new strategy?
Yeah, so when we initially rolled out in Bournemouth, we had a food waste insert that sat inside the bin. And we received funding from government because it was seen as innovation to have this insert. Unfortunately, it didn't work very well because a lot got lost, a lot got broken. So actually, we've now moved to the standard food waste container, which is a 23-litre container, which is a standalone. Probably seen around, they've got the big handles. So those are what we issue now. That is what we will issue all across Poole, and to residents in Bournemouth and Christchurch. If they request a new container, that's what they would get.
Thank you. Councillor Dutton Gibson, I think you're next.
Yeah, but just sort of almost the flats, but not quite. One area of my ward, St Michael's Road area, they have what are called communal wheelie bins. Presumably, you will effectively group those in with the flats, even though they're not flats necessarily.
Yeah, so they. Sorry, you're talking about the communal street bins, so they're the bins on the street. Yeah, they are shared bins. We have been out to all flat properties and done a site visit to sort of identify where we would put bins. And in those circumstances, if there isn't room on a property for a bin, we haven't allocated a bin without the resident actually requesting it or asking it and being willing to take ownership for it. So yes, those properties, some of them would be houses of multiple occupancy, wouldn't they? Or flats, but yes, they would be included in that communal flat section.
We get a lot of problem with those bins with people just putting the wrong thing in the wrong bin, which I'm not sure quite how you cure. I just wondered whether many of them have small areas at the front of the house, probably not big enough for a bin, but they might take one of those 23-litre containers. And I just wondered if that might help collection and whether it can be considered.
Yeah, so it's that ownership, isn't it? And if somebody's willing to have it on their property and put it out, then that is, yeah, we can accommodate that. But it's it not being on the highway or causing problems because they are quite small, aren't they? And then yeah, but we can accommodate if it is requested by residents. It can be done.
Happy. Okay, I'll carry on while I can't see any hands, and I've wrote loads of stuff down. And this comes actually to one of the statements which was read out earlier as well, and something that I picked up on is the circular economy section. I think it's number 2 in the strategy itself. Use circular economy and waste hierarchy principles. It's a very small section. How is this strategy going to do that and really embrace a future circular economy to make sure that what's being disposed of or recycled is and needs to be disposed of and recycled? How are we going to work on the strategy to, I know we've got the new to use shop, and if people taking things to the household recycling centres, they will get captured and brought out if they can be. But is there a bigger strategy to increase communications around it, reuse, repair cafes, things like this as well?
So I think from the 35 supporting actions, we are once adopted, we will then work those up into separate work streams over the next 10 years. These supporting actions are going to be sort of linked through our team plans to actually go to fruition. There very much is a commitment to the circular economy, to waste reduction, to repair. We are looking at relocating the new to use shop and at opportunities for expanding that opportunity. It's whether that we can do repair workshops. We're looking for sort of additional space. There is also a commitment to the reuse declaration, which has recently gone through, and we're looking to how we can support community groups such as the Repair Cafe. And yeah, there is more and more of that across BCP, that we want to use the tools we've got to support and promote. I think more will come.
Thank you. Councillor Rice, I think you just got there.
Can I carry on that bit of the conversation? So I agree that it's a relatively minor part of the report, and I also feel that it's not very clear what the circular economy is that we're talking about. At one of our workshops, it was mentioned that the circular economy was sort of cardboard going around the world and then coming back again and being reused, which in my head wasn't circular economy, but obviously in somebody else's head it was. So maybe more information about how you envisage that working in the BCP area so that ordinary people can visualize it in their heads. But also I was wondering strategically if it would be possible to get the costings of how much money we are investing in all of those different areas. The avoid, reuse, recycle, waste to energy disposal, and circular economy. Like, I'm just imagining that we're not putting much financial support into promoting circular economy, particularly because we don't have, well, we're not used to it, and maybe we're not getting funding from the government specifically to support it. So I don't see how we're going to be supporting the circular economy in reality, over and above energy from waste, for example. So it would be useful to know whether like what we're actually investing in that. And the other thought I just had was about how it just links into all of the businesses, really, how they make things that are then purchased by residents that can be part of a circular economy. If we're not linking in with those businesses and they're not making things that are part of the circular economy, we as a council are coming in at the end. And so are we building up a network of, I'm thinking sort of like large organizations like John Lewis and Argos and organizations like that need to be, councils need to be working with them to make sure that it's all going to circular economy.
Quite a lot in there. I was going to say that might be one for Councillor Hadley to come in with some of the political. But Ian, you seem very keen to jump in there. So.
I think there's a couple of things to consider here. If we take something like paint, for instance, we've long held the opinion that paint could be recycled and reused. The issue the council has is we don't have the facilities to do that, and it has to be done at scale. So finding a commercial outlet that can receive and process that and reintroduce it in a cost-effective way is a challenge. But the principle is there, and we practically every year we try to find a way of achieving that. The other side, the other scale of it is if you take repair workshops, invariably that's about finding people with the skills that are available and that are willing to undertake those. And again, it's about scale. So I think I probably receive a request at least annually for people who say, I can repair bikes and I can reintroduce them. And they're all very keen until they realise exactly how many bikes that we deal with. And they have the same capacity. They have the same issues that we do, which is how do we store as many bikes as we receive, and how do we process them, because they're not a manufacturing outlet, to enable them to get back out there. So there are those issues that we have to tackle, as well as just the principal idea of reintroducing the items back into the circular economy. I think the other thing is we as a council can be a conduit for most of this activity, but it does rely on people to want to do the right thing. So it relies on people choosing the right product that they can, repair, as opposed to the things that can't. And I think some of the issues that you've raised, Councillor, are set again at a national level, and that's exactly what government should be lobbying the manufacturers to ensure that their products can be maintained or repaired, as opposed to just thrown away.
Yeah, do you want to follow up?
So we can't rely on people doing the right thing. And I think we should be writing this in the document that that we're not going to succeed or something like this without legislation. And we as a council should be writing, we're not going to achieve whatever targets we've got unless the government introduce legislation, and all paint manufacturers have to recycle all the paint that they produce. Like, there is no way that we as a council can recycle that paint and coordinate it. And bicycles, the companies that produce the bicycles should be having to sort out the one, like if they don't make them so that they're fixable, then they have to sort out what happens to them.
Councillor Hadley?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's really important, but I guess it's at both ends of the spectrum, isn't it? So there are people in our community who are prepared, and I went down to the gather space and pool where we had volunteers who were fixing stuff, and there were people who were really happy to see the stuff that they thought they were going to have to skip being repaired and reused. Partly because they were getting them for free, so they would never go and buy a new one. But there are people with those skills who are prepared to do it. But actually, with the volume of waste, we might be able to chip away at the edge of it. But actually, if we want to hit the core and the people who don't want to do those sorts of things, either to help to fix or to take their stuff back to see if anyone can give it extra life, then that is down to how do we lobby government to achieve those sorts of things, and that's important. But I guess it's also within our local, and it's probably more within economic development or other parts of the council, how we can work with local businesses who would like to take things out of the waste stream. And very often that's downstream from us collecting it and selling it or paying someone to take it on. Things like the recyclers, there are benches and things that are made in Poole from recycled plastic, where they're taking pellets that are the output from the MRSC system that takes our waste. So it's whether we divert it from our waste stream or it gets diverted further down the stream, as it were. But I think plotting that is part of thinking about the circular economy, is about trying to turn that ship around and actually get to a point where we are enabling those things to happen more actively. And the other part for us that's difficult is, of course, if we do manage to get it out the stream, so whether it's the New For You, we can tell how much stuff we take out the waste stream at the New For You, but if it's a repair cafe that we don't run, that disappears out the statistics. Or if it's deposit glass, that disappears out of our recycling rate. And therefore, when we're trying to meet a 65% target, actually some of the more valuable elements of the recycling is gone from our stream. So for our own internal targets as a council, that becomes more difficult rather than.
Councillor Rice, I'll let you come back one more time on this one.
Well, I would like us to consider putting forward, what's it called? Amendment?
A recommendation.
A recommendation.
If you want to write one and
that we
bring it, then
think about some sort of lobbying aspect to the report, and also maybe if we could get like the three, in the ideal world, 3 items like paint or bicycles, something, 3 sort of that we would want our MPs to work to create a circular economy for them, and that would make a significant difference to our waste stream going forward. I don't know what those 3 would be, but as a starter, for example. But anybody can add anything, any suggestions for a recommendation.
Yeah, if anyone wants to make any recommendations, just put some words together and we can discuss it at the end. Just on this, Councillor Goodall, I'll come to you in a second. Just one thing on this that's document, and it's more of a holistic question about the document in itself. I was just going to use it as example. 2.3, develop waste services to boost closed recycling and keep materials in use instead of send them to landfill. From what I'm hearing you saying is, whilst these things don't exist at the moment or don't exist in ways that we'd like to be able to use them, like paint recycling, for example, that statements like this doesn't wed us to any particular solution, and that if they become available, then it's something which could be used in the future and we wouldn't be stuck with a antiquated waste strategy that can't use future solutions. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah, that's the flexibility element.
Cool. I just wanted to make sure that that's how I was reading it. Councillor Goodall.
Sorry, just a quickie. If I talk to residents who are also running small takeaways on the Ashley Road in Parkstone, can you just tell me which is the best containers for them to use? Because you don't want wet paper. I'm just assuming that there's plastic, foil, or wet or paper. So if I say, and what happens is the takeaway Chinese I go to use a lot of plastic, which I then put in the recycling. Is that the best? If I was going to them, are they doing the best that they can, or should I say, can you use paper or foil? Does it make any difference to you?
Well, the legislation requires commercial businesses to have all types of waste, both recycling, residual waste, and very shortly food waste. So they have to have all of those facilities available to them, and then it's the same dilemma that you get as a resident as to which one you put the materials in, and it's pretty prescriptive in terms of paper, cans and card go in the recycling, and the rest goes in residual oil and food.
So my point was, when we as consumers are picking a container up from the takeaway Chinese, for example, but when we're putting it in our bins at home, because it's clean when they get it, but it's not when we get it, is what the best container is after that.
Generally speaking, if it's a metal container, then put it into the recycling. There's always, when we first started recycling, there was this whole wash and squash idea, and that was largely to try and keep vermin at bay whilst containers were housed in bins, particularly during the hot summer months. But the reality is, when that waste is combined en masse in the transfer station and at the processing plants, the level of contamination is minuscule. It really has no effect, and it has no effect on the process.
I don't think you're actually answering Councillor Goodall's question. I think his question is, should he persuade the Chinese to give him a foil because you'd rather recycle the foil, or would he rather, am I understanding you correctly?
In an ideal world, we'd have the same containers all around, wouldn't we? And that's part of the government strategy, you know, ultimately to try and encourage people to use the best materials available. And I think, you know, plastic containers are probably the easiest for us to manage. But obviously metal ones have the higher value.
I was just say that there are hundreds of different types of containers on the market, and there's a lot of different priorities that you could put forward in it, and considerations when choosing which product you're going to use. Certainly, if we're looking at what could go in the recycling bin, you'd be looking at your plastic containers or a foil tray. Cardboard or paper-based, if it's got food contamination on it, that's not going to be recycled. There's a lot of compostable packaging out there, which there's some good compostable packaging and there's not so good compostable packaging, and it all depends on the environment that it is actually left in. So a lot of those packaging won't work in the commercial, in a home compost bin or in the commercial facilities. There's certain conditions that they need to actually compost at. So it's worth doing your research, is what I would say. We couldn't really recommend a particular. Yeah.
I was going to suggest taking your own Tupperware, Councillor Goodall. You might get a bigger portion as well, mate. And I've got Councillor Martin, and then I've got no other hands. So after, and then Councillor Rice, do you want to do a recommendation after that? So Councillor Martin will come to you first, then Councillor Rice, and then we'll draw a line under this item.
Oh, I've got some other questions.
We'll come to you next.
No, but questions as well.
Yes, yeah. It's okay. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, just thanks, Chair. It's just to say, like, obviously sitting on the strategy working group, informal as it is, you know, it was quite informative, the session that we have had so far, or 2 sessions that we've had so far. And I think there's a lot of work. Obviously, there's a lot to be done going forward. So in terms of like recommendations or picking apart individual things tonight, I'm not sure it's such an important matter. Although, of course, when it's the recommendation, I'm happy to back it. But it's, you know, I don't think this committee should be sort of saying, oh, okay, we've looked at a waste strategy and just chuck it back and say, oh, we'll see you in 10 years and we'll pick it apart then if you haven't achieved certain stuff. You know, I think there's lots in here, albeit we're obviously going to speak later about how tight we are with resource, but there's lots in here that actually needs to keep coming back to committee and keep being looked at over time. So it's just to say that I think that working group is a really useful forum, and I think this wouldn't be useful to carry on looking at this and not just sort of say, oh, we've done that and we can just send that out into the world, but sort of keep tabs on it.
Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, I think, well, actually, it was part of my answer to the question from the member of the public. We need to develop this over the next 10 years, and we will need business cases to develop aspects of it as we go forwards. But I think working group, stroke implementation group, there is something about cross-party trying to get consensus about how we take this back to the public, how we deal with the queries that come up, and the issues as we go forwards. Not least, you know, as we go through a re-procurement of all our waste streams in the next couple of years, that's going to be a really significant piece of work. And I welcome the scrutiny and the opportunity to have other people involved in the pain of exactly, you know, what do we do and how do we do the best for our public, which is what we're all here to try and do.
Councillor Rice. Microphone, please.
Thank you. So just on section 5, dispose of waste sustainability, we plan to do this by 5.1, tendering waste disposal contracts that embed the waste hierarchy and minimise the use of landfill. At the end of that, I would also like to add in and incineration. So minimise the use of landfill and incineration, if that was acceptable. Suppose I can ask if everybody agrees to that.
Yeah, so that's on section 5.1. So tender and waste disposal contracts, minimise the use of landfill and incineration. If you want to recommend that, I'm happy to second that.
Yeah, that's one recommendation.
Anyone?
Do the officers have anything to say about that, just in case it's not?
So I think, as we've discussed at the working group, it is a priority following the waste hierarchy to try and get as much out of the waste stream as possible, but there is a significant element that still does need to be disposed of, and the part of the tender process is to go out and see what available technology there is. Energy recovery does come above landfill in the waste hierarchy, which is why landfill was included in that sentence and energy recovery wasn't.
Yes, so I assume it's just a different way of putting it. You're not saying that we can't put it there, and certainly we are trying to get things much higher up the top. Yes. And then the bottom two, what I'm suggesting is that we phrase at the bottom two are landfill and incineration, just to apply a bit of emphasis. So it sounds as if it's possible.
Do you want to carry on with the rest of what you want to do first, and then we can discuss it as a committee?
So 5.3, prioritising waste site proximity where possible. So waste travels only as far as it needs to and reduces the significant carbon impact of transporting waste, comma, what did I write? 1 second. Whilst also considering the carbon footprint of the type of disposal. So I just don't like the way that it's phrased, that the emphasis of the carbon footprint of the transport is emphasised, and I would like to put an emphasis on that we should also be considering the carbon footprint in the type of disposal. So adding on the bit, whilst also considering the carbon footprint of the type of disposal as another recommendation. And then an extra point I think would fit into that section would be, when considering the circular economy, we will work with our local MPs and government to influence the manufacturing industry to ensure products are made so that recycling is designed in at the manufacturing stage, so that it does not require disposal. Something along those lines. I expect we could just copy and paste something from the circular economy page, but
I feel like it would be very difficult to put within our waste strategy to instruct manufacturers to do
well, we're working with our local MPs and governments to influence it, is what I put at the beginning.
Okay.
If that makes any difference.
Yeah, if that's the three, if you've wrote it down, I don't know if you want to circulate it around the committee and we can discuss it. I'll ask Councillor Hadley if you've got any comments on any of that.
Absolutely. The carbon footprint of the whole process is important, and that's what effectively you're saying. And the second one, and I think that's a reasonable challenge. Whether we know the full footprint, because obviously we're reliant on national figures for some things and our proportion of national figures rather than the actual numbers. So it might be some of it is about estimates rather than actual figures, but in principle, I don't have a problem with that. I'd be interested to see what the officers say. In terms of the third one, the circular economy, that's partly the purpose of the way in which the extended provider responsibilities is set up, is to try and influence the manufacturers to change their habits, to look at the particularly packaging, but actually it's extending that extended responsibility to other items, was I think the thrust of what the committee were talking about earlier. And I think that's a good thing. Whether it should go in that part of the strategy or not, I probably have to the officers, or whether it's just a separate recommendation we write to government to try and influence them, because that's about their strategy rather than our strategy.
Georgina or Ian, do you want to comment on that?
I'm not sure at this point whether we can influence national policy via our strategy. I'd have to take that under advice, and whether it's appropriate for our strategy. The one usually follows the other. Our strategy usually works under the national umbrella, so we'd have to take advice as to whether that was an appropriate use of that document.
Yeah, it's the waste hierarchy you're referring to, isn't it? Which is in national legislation, so that is, well, we can't alter that at a local level, but I think maybe your recommendation about working with national forums, because as officers we do work with a number of national waste forums that then have collective power to be working with government. So maybe that could make it more effective.
And remember, we don't have to make a recommendation to change things in the report. We can also make separate recommendations to Cabinet or Council from this committee.
So we can just ask the leader to write to the MPs or something like that separately. I would like it to be in the strategy document. I personally feel that it would be, I don't see a problem with putting it in our strategy. The government are asking us to get to certain levels, and we're going to struggle by the sounds of it. So part of our strategy for doing what they're telling us to do is to write back to them and say, you need to help us more upstream. So I don't particularly have a problem with introducing it into, well, I would like to see it in this document.
Okay. So you're making, can you circulate the wording? If you sent it around, sorry, I've been concentrating elsewhere. Okay, thank you. So that's when considering the circular economy, we'll work with our local MPs and government. And the wordings for the other ones were just to add in. Yes, please. That'd be really useful if you can. And then I think maybe we can take them separately, if that's okay. And has anyone else on the committee got any comments to make on those recommendations? Yeah, Councillor John.
Just on the first one, is it not true to say that since we've said looking for waste providers who will embed the hierarchy, we've effectively already said not just that they minimise landfill, effectively they're pushing it as high up the hierarchy as they can. That's implicit. We only mention landfill because that's the bottom of the chain, but in every case we would want them to be moving it to the highest possible level that's appropriate for that. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say so, but I think there's also there's targets for landfill diversion as well, which is one of the reasons that it was in there. You know, we're committed to diverting 90% of our waste from landfill, which is why that was sort of stuck on the end.
Okay, if you just give us a moment, we can just have a look at those recommendations. So actually, why don't we take the one that I've got first, which is the one about the circular economy. So Councillor Rice will be looking for someone to second, including the phrase, when considering the circular economy, we will work with our local MPs and government to influence the manufacturing industry to ensure products are made so that recycling is designed in at the manufacturing stage, and add that in to the waste strategy. Okay, is there a seconder for that? I'm sorry. Okay, without a seconder, we can't take it to a vote. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask. I mean, the manufacturing industry is basically China, isn't it? And I can't honestly see how much influence we've got on China. We've got far more influence on the delivery services like Amazon and DPD and all those, with the size of the boxes and the packaging that they have, than we have on influencing manufacturers. But that's my opinion anyway. Sorry for listening.
We've gone on this item for quite a bit longer than we wanted to, so I'm going to leave that one there because we have got the other two recommendations which you wanted to put in, which is adding into the strategy at 5.1 the words and incineration at the end of tendering the waste disposal contracts that embedded the waste hierarchy and minimised the use of landfill and incineration. And the other one, can you just remind me of that, please?
Adding on to the end of the sentence, whilst also considering the carbon footprint of the type of disposal.
Okay, I'm happy to second them both as a single recommendation, if you're okay with that. And then, is there any debate on that at all? In that case, can we just go to a vote of those in support of those recommendations? That's unanimous. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Before we close it out, I do appreciate exactly where you were coming from with the recommendation, the first one that we discussed as well, about the circular economy, and I'll be more than happy to work with you as bringing something from this committee as a separate recommendation to Cabinet at some point about what we can do and how we can bring in the MPs and influence that on a more local level. So I think that's something we can do from here, just not within the strategy itself. On that, I'll just say thank you to Councillor Hadley, Georgina, Ian, thank you for joining us and bringing that strategy forwards. And yeah, we'll take those recommendations forward to Cabinet, and I'm sure I'll see you there as well when we bring that forward. Thank you very much. We will then have to move on to item 8, which is the Southern Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority. And I'm really pleased to ask Pia Bateman to join us, who's the CEO of the Southern Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, who's going to give a short presentation for us to tell us about what they're doing there and also answer any questions which we have and about how this committee may be able to get more involved in supporting them as well. So I'll give you a couple of moments to settle. I think you've got a presentation you want to get up. Perfect. So welcome, Pia, and yeah, looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm Pia Bateman. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Southern Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, and I just wanted to quickly run you through a bit of an introduction once I've worked out how to use this. Okay, so I wanted to run you through an introduction because one of the councillors, Crispin, who sits on our authority, leads me to believe that we're not really known in the local community. So I wanted to come here and explain who we are, what we do, what the team structure looks like, how we work with BCP Council and deliver our duties in the local environment. So I will give you a very quick tour of what we do, let's say the less exciting stuff, and then at the back end of the presentation, I'll discuss more of the work we do that's relevant to BCP, because we have quite a wide remit. So we were created about 15 years ago under the Marine and Coastal Access Act, which you may have heard of. There are 10 of us in the UK. Our remit covers the southern area, so we run from Lyme Regis all the way to halfway through Chichester Harbour. So we have a pretty large remit. BCP Council, obviously, your inshore waters being part of that. So we work out to 6 nautical miles, and at 6 nautical miles, the Marine Management Organisation take over. you'll see on the little map where we are, we also have the Isle of Wight included in that. We have a national vision that the 10 IFCAs adhere to, and you'll see by looking at that vision, we've got quite a challenge because our main aim is to balance social, environmental and economic benefits of fisheries with a healthy marine environment. And that's not always easy when you have multiple stakeholders. We also have a local vision, which our authority put together in financial year 24-25. This is to champion prosperous inshore fisheries which are founded upon thriving marine environments. This is hugely important to us at Southern IFCA, which is why we came up with this vision. We really do have very good examples of where we're achieving dual objectives. So we're not just protecting the fishing industry, but also furthering the marine environment and conservation objectives. And we have some very nice case studies, particularly within Poole Harbour, of where we really are achieving that, which is recognised as blueprint management nationally, which is pretty important to the BCP area. And I should just quickly say, when I'm talking about fisheries, I'm talking about commercial fisheries. So those members of the community who will go out and fish to sell the produce, and then that moves up the chain. We're also talking about recreational sea anglers. There may be a few in this room that will take their rod down and fish off Bournemouth Pier or one of the piers or Chesil Beach, and they're not doing that for profit, they're doing that for their well-being, they're doing that for their enjoyment. I've popped up our statutory roles and responsibilities. For those of you that don't really want to dig deep into that, I guess the main take-home message is that the Marine and Coastal Access Act is our bread and butter of legislation. Section 153, and you'll see by the bullet points, gives us clear responsibility to manage those balancing objectives within the inshore environment. Importantly, we need to also, in delivering our jobs, make sure that we are delivering the needs of every person involved in that marine coastal environment, whether that be recreational anglers, commercial fishers, conservationists. We also have to adhere to achieving sustainable development in the marine environment, and we fundamentally need to ensure that the fisheries are harvested in a sustainable way. The Section 154 duties are slightly unique and sit nicely under our more broader duties, where we really are able to consider the socio-economic needs of the fishing industry alongside marine conservation. Our Section 154 duties are specific to what we have to do within marine conservation zones. And within marine conservation zones, we're unable to take into account socio-economics and the impact. So, for example, if Natural England designate a particular habitat or feature in a marine conservation zone, we have to manage that without considering the stakeholder who may have been operating in that area for a long amount of time. That's where some tension can come into the job that we do, let's say. We also have responsibilities under the Habitats Directive, and this is for wider marine protected areas. So we have a special protection, we have duties in special protection areas and special areas of conservation. So one of those is specific to birds and one of those is specific to habitats. So where fishing activity interacts ultimately with either the protected habitat or the protected species, we have to be putting management in place. We also have duties under the Wildlife and Countryside Act, and that in developing our management interventions, we have to have consideration of the components within the SSSIs. So we have a vast remit of duties. So to give you a bit of an idea of our membership, you might recognise one of those faces up there. We have a joint committee. We have 21 members. That's determined and set in legislation. You will see on the top row that we have 9 councillors representing 6 local authorities that cover the geographic footprint of our district. The larger councils, such as BCP, we have 2 representatives. You'll see that Councillor Crispin Goodall is one and Councillor Pete Miles is another. We're grateful very much so to Crispin for all the work that he does for us, and in fact, even introducing me to this sort of forum. Alongside our councillors who attend quarterly meetings, we have general members, and general members are MMO appointees. So the Marine Management Organisation will appoint members that have expertise in the inshore marine environment. So that could be academics, that could be sector representatives, commercial, recreational. It might be legal expertise. One of our members at the moment is a barrister, so we have that angle of things. We also have at the moment a local farmer, aquaculture farmer, who operates in Poole Harbour. So their expertise coming together to draw into our decision-making processes is paramount to make sure that we are representing the community that we are working for. In addition to the general members and the councillors, we also have appointed members that attend our meetings. So we have a representative from the Environment Agency, the Marine Management Organisation and Natural England. And that really is key because it helps us draw together strategies and management interventions, which often cross over with different government organisations. So that's basically our membership. Councillor Goodall also sits on our executive subcommittee. So he has a bit of an insight into our budget and finances, purchases of new capital equipment, decisions around that, outcomes of formal public consultations, risk management, health and safety, sort of the nuts and bolts of the business, including appointment of my position and my deputies. So we're very grateful to Crispin for that. Aside from the 4 authority meetings, the 4 executive committee meetings, we also have 4 technical meetings a year. So we're pretty busy in that respect from governance. This is what the team look like. We are very small. There's approximately 15 of us, and I'll say approximately because we've got a couple of positions on hold at the moment. The majority of the people on that presentation you can see are permanent members of staff. We have 3 part-time members of staff, the rest are full-time. We also have a project officer who's funded directly by DEFRA and has been for the last 2 years, that's working on a specific DEFRA policy. We're very close to DEFRA and the Marine Fisheries Department, and we undertake work on their behalf that is above and beyond our core duties that I explained at the beginning. Those 16 members of staff are split ultimately into 3 teams. Business services team at the top, which is where all of our part-time members of staff sit. We also have a compliance and enforcement team, and this might be where you all get slightly excited because we're looking at marine assets. Our marine and enforcement team have powers under the Marine and Coastal Act to enforce any bylaw that we develop. UK orders and statutory instruments, bylaws made by the Marine Management Organisation, and any codes of practice we have. So it's good practice as regulators to introduce basically voluntary codes of practice in helping or hoping that there is compliance within the district. If we get to a point where there is non-compliance, then we will start to develop statutory instruments. So the compliance enforcement team work under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, so we do move case files to prosecution. That's one half of our team. You'll see on the slide some of our marine assets. We have Fisheries Protection Vessel Protector, which is on the left-hand side. She is a 7.8 metre rib. She's based over in Portland. She's trailable, so we can be very reactive to intelligence coming in across the district. She's great for rapid response. She's not commonly used. She's not our go-to vessel, but she is fantastically agile when we need to be reactive. The second one in, the aluminium boat, is specific to Poole Harbour. She has a very low draft and her A-frame can come down, so we can go into the very hard to reach areas in Poole Harbour. Vigilant is the cabin rib that you'll see, the 3rd one along. This has actually relatively recently been funded by DEFRA, which is absolutely fantastic. She really has been a game changer. Our officers can be at sea a lot longer in more comfortable conditions. You'll see she has a cabin, whereas our other rib protector doesn't. We also have, we're one of the only IFCAs at this point to have a drone and actively be using that drone. We have 2 drones for enforcement functions. They are really fantastic when you're considering looking at spatial management. And a lot of our legislation involves closure areas, prohibition areas to certain vessels. And drones are brilliant at providing evidence to ensure that those spatial closures are adhered to. In recent weeks, we've actually won a national award for the use of our innovative use of our drone in Poole Harbour in particular. So it's a really good asset, and when you consider the relative resource pull from a drone versus a crew with a boat, it's financially viable and very good when supporting illegal fisheries activities or the identification of them. We also have a research and policies team. So they have 3 core functions. They monitor inshore fisheries, they develop management interventions, so ultimately statutory instruments. And we also have to review those statutory instruments and our interventions to make sure that they're actually doing the job that they were intended to do. So we, in monitoring, we undertake stock assessments and surveys, quite often with industry. We will use industry vessels and the expertise of the fishermen to undertake these on a regular basis. The reason we do this is to contribute to our decision-making processes, so we can see what's going on the ground and whether further intervention is needed, and understand the health of the stocks across the district. We undertake some on an annual basis. We will also do some on an ad hoc basis, depending on what the need is. When we are developing inshore management interventions, we're ultimately developing bylaws, and it takes a lot of time with regard to consultation. I was listening to an earlier item when you were discussing how you intend on consulting. It is a challenge because a select number of industry and stakeholders will contribute, and those that contribute aren't always necessarily the positive contributors. So it's a real challenge for us to really get into the community and discuss with our stakeholders what we're doing, why we're doing it, the legislation that is requiring us to do it. So the process of a bylaw and developing a bylaw can take anywhere between 18 months and 4 to 5 years. So when we develop that bylaw, it then has to be signed off by the Secretary of State. So we send it up the line to DEFRA, and there are challenges with the turnaround there. We also have to review. So some of our bylaws are permit bylaws, which allow us the flexibility to respond to the best available evidence. So if we have a standalone bylaw, it's very challenging to amend that bylaw because of the process of amending legislation. But with permit bylaws, we have permit conditions attached to a bylaw, and then on a usually annual basis, we will consider whether those permit conditions need updating based on the health of the stock. They're a really, really good tool. And a lot of IFCAs are now using flexible permit bylaws, which require, by the nature of them, a lot of consultation with industry to make sure that we're doing what we should be doing and we're fully transparent. Funding and budgets then, I'm not sure how aware those in the room are, but BCP Council are one of our funders. The legislation that is governing our finances states that relevant councils have to pay the expenses incurred by the authority. So Dorset, Hampshire, the Isle of Wight and BCP receive an additional grant from government to do this. That grant is based on the footprint of the shoreline for those councils. So some of the smaller councils like Southampton and Portsmouth didn't receive that extra funding. You'll see, as with all, I'm sure, government and local authority organisations, we are running in a deficit. We, on an annual basis, try and make as many cutbacks as we can, recognising that that's not always possible. Last year, for example, when we had our budget setting meeting in December, we sought a 57% increase on our levy. And when you consider that across the 6 councils, for BCP, that meant a £6,000 increase in contributions. And when you consider the operational costs of running the marine assets that we do, that was purely to recognise the NJC payments and the national insurance contributions that were put upon businesses and organisations last year. So actually that uplift was not related to the increasing operational costs that we have. But I think it's important that the BCP are aware of the fact that they do support us financially, and we're thankful and grateful to them for approving that uplift last year. Now, I told you that I would start with the less exciting things, and then I would discuss sort of the value for money and what we do within the BCP area. So this first slide describes the BCP area. You've got some images of the common fish and shellfish that are harvested in this area. There's a lot of commercial fishing activity in Poole Harbour. There's a pump scoop dredge fishery, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, which is pretty unique. It's the only pump scoop fishery in the country as far as I'm aware. It's a permitted fishery. We have 45 permit holders that fish between May and December. We also have netting, trap and pot fisheries and rod and line. The key species in the harbour are clam and cockle. And then outside in Poole Bay, we have more lobster, black sea bream, crab, mullet, etc., and whelks. We also manage aquaculture activity within Poole Harbour. It's the largest several order in the UK that we manage, and the key species harvested there are Pacific oysters and mussels. It's a fantastic aquaculture, thriving aquaculture business there. We lease grounds to a number of aquaculture farmers, and a lot of that produce is exported over to Europe. There's a lot of recreational interest in charter and rod and line community within the area. This area, BCP, Dorset in general, is nationally important for sea angling, and people will come down from London on day trips. Species of interest include black sea bream and rays. And actually we have the majority of our vessels registered in this area, in Poole and in Mudderford, so there are 83 registered vessels. This is very quickly to demonstrate to you the marine protected areas that are relevant to the BCP area. So within those, there are either protected habitats or species. As I described earlier, within the marine conservation zones, we're not able to take into account socioeconomics of fishers, but where there are SPAs or SACs, we are able to manage the often conflict between fisheries priorities and conservation priorities. This slide is demonstrating the surveying and monitoring that we undertake in the BCP area. We work with a lot of universities as well as industry, as I said before. One of our biggest surveys is the Poole Harbour bivalve survey, and that informs the permit conditions in the Poole Harbour dredge fishery. Also, a lot of the information that we're gathering in our data collection survey and monitoring programme is feeding into national policies, fisheries management plans you might be familiar with that DEFRA are very focused on at the moment. So there are a lot of data gaps in the science that we are trying to plug on behalf of DEFRA. This is the complicated slide. I wouldn't worry about it too much, but it basically demonstrates the statutory instruments that we've been developing over the last couple of years and what's relevant to this area. So the biggest one being the review of the bottom tow fishing gear bylaw. A lot of you may have heard there's a lot of societal interest in bottom tow fishing gear and whether that should or shouldn't exist in marine protected areas. And the government have aims to have 30% protections by 2030. Well, our bottom tow fishing gear across the district, the bylaw, is nearly up to 29% coverage. So that just demonstrates within a small geographical area of the inshore environment, we are near on target. Within BCP, the figures are up there. I think the increase went from 4 to 10% with the review, and the information that feeds into that review comes from Natural England, and it's about feature-based management. We also have under development at the moment a Black Sea bream review. This is very relevant to a marine conservation zone in Poole Rocks, which is just in the harbour, and that review is going to be coming to an end point in the next couple of weeks. We've also undertaken a shore gathering review. Our shore gathering bylaw is sat with DEFRA and the Secretary of State waiting to be signed, as is our pot fishing bylaw, which was up with DEFRA in, I think, the back end of 2023, early 2024. So they are, there seems to be a bit of a delay with that, but that is in the pipeline. This demonstrates the compliance and enforcement activity and patrols that we undertake in the area. It's very busy. We don't just do it on our own. We do have joint patrols with the police, with Border Force, with BCP, your environmental health officers. We've undertaken 72 sea patrols, boarding inspections, 66. The slide demonstrates our focus areas. It demonstrates our enforcement actions, our court outcomes. It's a really busy area for us, and it's essential that we maintain that thriving industry whilst balancing the conservation objectives. Aside from compliance and enforcement and the development of policy and bylaw, we're also very keen on engaging. It's so important that we are the voice of the fishers as well, because they don't really have a voice. They're not as well supported as the conservation branch of things, where there are a lot more voices. So we try and integrate ourselves in the community as much as we can, and then take that feedback to DEFRA to explain challenges that our fishermen might be facing, and also feeding into policy development up in DEFRA. I believe that's all. I told you it would be a very quick gallivant through our jobs. I wanted to thank both the Chair and Vice Chair and also Crispin for having me, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting, and I must admit I know very little about what you do and very little about maritime industry and fishing and everything like that. So as we were going through, I started writing down questions, and you seemed to answer them as we were going through, and I've ended up with loads of what I think are really stupid questions about just fishing in general, which I'm not even going to read out. So has anyone got any questions for Pia? Councillor Rice.
Yes, I was just wondering the impact of climate change on the fishing industry, and I was having a look at your website. I can't see any information there about it, but I was just wondering what impact there is going to be. Like, do you know offhand? And if not, could you consider taking that away as something to be a resource for providing information to a different sector of society? Because it's hard to get this information out and the importance of it, and people don't actually know what's coming.
May I? I would love to say I knew what was coming with climate change. I don't think anybody does. The industry are right there day in, day out, for not only within their own sphere, but their generational fishers who understand the changes in the marine environment. Over the last couple of years, it has become more apparent that species abundance has changed. You may have heard of the octopus coming in into the southwest of the country. So this year in particular, there's been a bloom in octopus coming in. They believe, the scientists in CFAS who are monitoring things like climate change and other government organisation, believe that's to do with the warming waters. In the octopus coming through, and they came up about as far as the back end of our district, so they came through Devon and Sevens district, so the sort of Lyme Regis area and Brixham area. The octopus have been taking advantage of the crab and lobster stocks, so as a result, that fishery has been challenging, and fishers are having to diversify. So there are key examples of specific species that we don't usually see, or Mediterranean fish are more common coming into our waters. I don't know what the future is, but I would say that has always been change, stock collapse, stock recovery, diversification of fisheries. It's just becoming increasingly evident now that it's happening at a very fast rate. We have commitments in our strategies to, where we can, undertake monitoring of things like water temperature. It's not something that falls within our remit, but within DEFRA, within CFAS, and within other government organisations, they really are getting a handle on climate change.
And in terms of taking it back to your team, in terms of educating the members of the public that you have access to, that look at your information and the people you work with, is it something that you can take away, that we as a council are struggling to communicate the importance of climate change? Are you able to take it away as well?
I can absolutely take it away. It doesn't fall within our legislative remit. Specifically, we manage fisheries activities and how that interacts with conservation. But by default, we are learning quite a lot on the ground about changes in species. That's the sort of information that when we regularly meet with DEFRA, they want to know, because it would be something that DEFRA would be managing through their other arm's length bodies. When it comes to communicating that to our community, well, actually, they're communicating it a lot more to us with regard to those changes, but we can definitely explore somewhere useful on our website where we can signpost our stakeholders to the right government organisations who are looking at things like this. Happy to take that away.
Can I just follow on a little bit from that? Where you mentioned about the octopuses coming in and the crab and lobster populations decreasing and that impacting, where do you move from creating the fishery to the conservation? If you see species change, how does that interact? If, like you said, the fisheries had to diversify, at what point does it become more of a conservation issue than a fishing issue? What's the crossover point?
I'll try my best to answer that. So with regard to the conservation issue, if a stock is under threat and Natural England deemed that that stock needs protection from a conservation point of view within a marine protected area or a marine conservation zone, then we would implement the management. When it comes to the fisheries side of management, where the stock is collapsing, let's say, we would then intervene and put in the relevant measures. We wouldn't know the cause of that based on whether that would be climate change, whether that would be marine pollution, whether that will be overfishing. So we can only very much work within our scope of whether it is fisheries that is causing an impact on that species. That's where it becomes quite complicated with regard to understanding the big ecosystem ultimately.
Understood. So it wouldn't be your decision alone to make it. It'd be made with DEFRA, it'd be made with everyone else. Okay. Councillor Moriarty.
Thank you. Forgive me, this is probably a really stupid question. Do you have any input? Oh, actually, do we have any farmed fish around the coast? And do you have any responsibility for those animals' welfare, or is that a different organisation?
So we don't have responsibility for their welfare. We do have farmed fish when it comes to aquaculture in Poole Harbour. So the clams and cockles and mussels that are being grown in Poole Harbour. So we manage that statutory instrument. So we undertake management of the leaseholders. We ensure that they meet certain permit conditions and lease conditions. So from a compliance and enforcement aspect, we have that responsibility, and that links into biosecurity and movement of the shellfish species. We work with CFAS, another government organisation, with regard to biosecurity. The downward protections of the welfare of those, for example, a wrasse being taken up to the Scottish sea farms, that wouldn't be our responsibility. I believe that falls with the RSPCA, but I'm not fully sure. Yeah, so we don't have welfare responsibilities.
Okay with that, Councillor Gillett.
So just picking up on it, so you don't, in terms of like the sort of the welfare of species. So, for example, you wouldn't get involved with maybe like the seahorses in the for Studland and things. You're not Because you've got the boats, you could go out and tell the boats not to park there.
Absolutely, and we do have joint patrols with the Marine Management Organisation who are responsible for that.
Okay.
So they will charter our vessel and we will work on their behalf, but the actual responsibility for the for the seahorses is
Okay, brilliant.
the protection for seahorses in Studland is related to anchoring rather than fisheries.
Thank you. Any more questions from the committee? Councillor Martin?
Yeah, you mentioned about bottom toad fishing being obviously something that's quite high up in the public consciousness. Is that something that you observe that deserves to be, in terms of the damage it is doing to and the potential and the need to actually mitigate against that? Like, that's not just something that is, I suppose, from an expert opinion, in terms of that's not just something that's in the public consciousness, but it doesn't deserve that. It's actually out there now destroying our, our marine landscape as we speak.
So I can respond to that with regard to the remit I have in inshore fisheries, where there is interaction of bottom toe fishing gear with a protected feature, there are prohibitions. So we have full prohibitions to bottom toe fishing gear where there is that species interaction. The sort of more societal debate is whether there should be blanket bans on bottom toe fishing gear. The legislation specifically requires us to manage features, not marine areas. With regard to that, that's where there is a tension building, but the legislation clearly requires us to be feature-based managers.
You content with that answer? Well, I mean, it's an answer. It's a difficult one. I understand where you've got crossovers with different responsibilities and that, yeah.
I mean, I suppose. So, in terms of feature-wise, can that become all-encompassing?
That would be dependent on how Natural England want to classify things. So, for example, in Lyme Bay, we have reef features which are protected. So wherever that footprint of the reef is, there is a prohibition to bottom toe fishing gear. If the legislation changes, it could be all encompassing to suit the marine protected area footprint rather than a feature footprint. Then you've got the balance of, well, actually, what about the socio-economics of a fishery and the fishing industry surviving where it's not interacting with the feature? So why would you close an area that's not causing damage? So there are lots of variables to take into account with the bottom toe fishing gear debate.
I was sort of just wondering how loose the definition was of a feature. I suppose it is quite tight of what a feature is and the area that covers.
Interesting. Anything further from the committee? In that case, just thank you very much for coming in and speaking to us, Pia. I found that really quite enlightening and I definitely learned a lot, and I'll probably have loads more questions when I reread things and look into it more, so I may be in touch at some point to have a chat. But yeah, it's something we've not heard before and it's really, really interesting. So thank you for coming and bringing it to our attention. And thank you, Councillor Goodall, as well, for making the connection and allowing Pia the opportunity.
My pleasure. Can I just say there's a fairly extensive CIFCA website as well, if you need to have a look. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are on for 10 to 8, so I want to move very quickly on to the next item, if that's all right with everyone, and we'll try and get through. I think they're two quite short items. The next one is the Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report, where we've got Lindsay here to introduce it. I believe this is just for information, because this also came to Overview and Scrutiny Board last night, and it's also going to the other Overview and Scrutiny committees as well. But it is an opportunity for us to bring anything up on it. So, Lindsay, over to you.
Yeah, Chair, to be honest, I wasn't intending to really say much because, as you say, it's for information. It's going through all the ONS committees with the substantive discussion at ONS board on Monday that we've already had. So there are recommendations in the report that will be going on to council. That's where any decisions will be made. So if the ONS committee does want to say anything about those, they are welcome to. And if you've got any questions on them, on any of the report, I can expand on anything. but I wasn't intending to say any more than that unless you really want me to.
No, I've got no. Actually, I have got one question just for clarification on it. And I think it's the only thing which really impacts us directly is once this goes through, is this where the change happens from planning and local plan moving over to overview and scrutiny board formally? Is that correct?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, that change has kind of been put in place by the monitoring officer in agreement with the chairs under joint working procedure rules. But I just wanted to sort of tighten things up to make it really clear so there's no confusion in the future or anything like that. So yes, that's recommended in this report that all of planning and local planning, so all of the leaders' portfolio would be going through accountability through the ONS board. And then it wouldn't be in environment and place anymore.
Cool, thank you. So has anyone got any questions or comments for Lindsay on this, or are we all quite content? Councillor Martin?
Yeah, sorry, Chair.
It's all right.
I'm happy for Lindsay to tell me to go. I was here for the first half of ONS board, so I'm happy for content if she says go back and watch the debate on this, and that's fine. But I'm just wondering. But I do wonder if it wasn't covered there in great detail. What is the definition of so like now obviously we can only be doing one item as a whole, and then scope, and so there's nothing is it like specific about timelines? So something, if you've got like a really meaty kind of item that is being dealt with, and there's something else come through scoping, and the chairs and vice chairs have agreed that okay, we'll look at these items. If that goes on, if things like that just drag on, and I don't mean that pejoratively, but where we've got stuff queued up, we could be waiting a very long time before that actually happens. Is that just the reality of it?
Do you want to comment on that, Lindsay?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a good question and point to explore and make sure you're comfortable with as a committee. So just to give a bit more background to this, then the report's recommending that the council moves to one item of in-depth scrutiny work across the whole function at a time. Whereas at the moment under the constitution, all 4 committees can be doing one at a time, which means 4 could be going on. And what we found is against the programme of committee meetings that we have, which is 27 in the year, it's just beyond the resources we have really to be able to do the work in a timely way. So at the moment, I think some councillors and committees will feel like some of their work is getting backed up and not being advanced. And I think also what we're really seeing is that we're not finding enough time to be able to scope things as much as we'd want, and it is in the topic selection and the scope of topics that you're really going to add the value and get meaningful outcomes through overview and scrutiny. So that's the intention behind the recommendation. In terms of how it will work in practicality, it would mean that the chairs group help decide which of those in-depth pieces of work go ahead first and second and third, etc. And it would mean there's a bit more of an order to that. And so it puts a responsibility, I think, on the chairs to make a decision on whether, for example, if there is a longer in-depth piece of work, is that the most important piece of work to be doing at that time? Or is there something else that's a quicker piece of work that is of greater priority? And I think it's going to force us to more robustly prioritise than perhaps we are now. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I was asked the other night what happens if a piece of work starts and then, you know, gets clogged up and doesn't advance for some reason, like people are on leave or something slows it down. And, you know, I'm sure we would be pragmatic in that respect and would, you know, look to move on to other work before coming back. But I think as a general principle, what we're saying is there's enough resources to do one piece of in-depth work well at a time, and then move on to something else, so that we have much more of a quality over quantity kind of approach than we do at the moment. So I don't know if that answers the question enough or gives you some assurance, but I think that's how we're approaching it.
Thank you. And I think just for my clarification as well, the way I understood it is this is in-depth pieces of work which are supported by democratic services. So, for example, if we had a committee member like Councillor Rice, for example, who's gone off and done a piece of work on pedestrian crossing timings, that's not so much supported by democratic services. So we could have pieces like that going on at the same time with rapporteurs and people, individual members within the committee going off and scoping work outside of that as well for us to approach it in different ways. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, through your chair, I think in fact, I think through the report, we're clear that we encourage more of that rapporteur approach and that member-led approach so that issues can be moved forward. And I think that members can do more to actually scope issues and do background research on issues to get them off the ground, so that when we do get to the point where democratic services gets involved and is heavily involved in the resource side, that we're sort of good to go and we can hit the ground running with something. So absolutely, that's the direction we want to go in.
Thank you. Are you okay with that, Councillor Martin?
Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal, I don't think, but obviously with resources, it's completely understandable. I'm just wondering if there's like kind of deadlock amongst the chairs and vice chairs and you know, quite a bit of to and fro in there where sort of the overview of the decisions that body's making, if that's going to take on more importance, is, you know, how is that kind of scrutinised, I suppose?
Yeah, I understand. I hear your concerns with that as well. It does make it difficult when it goes to another meeting which isn't necessarily in the public domain and we don't know why those decisions have been made. Although I'd always endeavour to try and bring why we've made those decisions back to committee, so at least we can air it and see why. And when we have spoke about this in the past, my personal feelings has been it's a resource thing, and it's the same resource problem that we've got throughout the council, that we have to make sacrifices in certain areas in order to get good quality work done. I'd rather see us try this and it work well, hopefully work and work well, and that actually maybe we can get through 4 or 5 pieces of work and every committee gets to do something a year, rather than having quite a sprawling, not very well supported number of pieces of work that don't get results. I'd rather see something happen. That's my feeling on it. So yeah, that's about all I've got to say about it, really. But I'm fairly content with this report as our committee. I think it's a good point to just highlight what we've been doing and show what we've been doing, the recommendations that we've been making. We have been making a difference and review our past year, and obviously we get this every year now, so we can see what impact this change will actually have as well on the results that we're getting. So yeah, I'm happy to move that we support this in it going to full council. If there's someone willing to second that, and Councillor Dalton Gibson, and if we're willing to oh, Lindsay, sorry, I didn't see your hand, it's hiding there in the corner.
That's all right. And sorry, I just really wanted to come back on that point that was made about the chairs prioritising things, and just to give some reassurance, we're planning to introduce a matrix. Some councils use that already, so that almost a scoring that you can apply to topics that are suggested, to give a bit more of an evidence-led approach to, you know, why decisions are made around what is prioritised. And absolutely, we need to bring the discussions that the chairs have out into, you know, a transparent way, feed them back to committees. There's no intention of doing anything sort of behind closed doors, but really just working with the chairs group on a really regular basis, so that things can be sort of agile and we're not sort of clogged up waiting for committee meetings to make decisions. And I also just wanted to highlight that the chairs, as we develop these proposals, we did explore the ONS board itself taking on that role around prioritisation, because a lot of councils do work under that model where one overarching board will decide the work programmes across the rest of committees. It's quite common, but I think everyone was quite clear that they wanted all the ONS committees to retain their own, powers to decide things. And absolutely, there's no intention that what you put on your agendas normally, like committee reports, would need to change. You'd still have all your powers to do that. It's just sort of the working group or really in-depth pieces of work that need a lot of scoping and support that will probably be affected. And I also just wanted to say that I don't want it to sort of appear that we're not like we're having a bit of a moan around resources and like we're not doing the best we can with them. We're absolutely in a place where the culture around ONS has, I think, progressed really well over the last few years. We've done loads of investment in training and development. We've got really skilled chairs and members in place, and so we are in a position to really advance the way we do our work and get better outcomes than we are now. And I think it's just about harnessing that opportunity and then trying something and keeping it under review.
Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, I think what you highlighted there as well is just quite important, that we have improved as ONS. And I think testament to that is how many things full council keep chucking at ONS when it comes to them, that it's actually being filtered down in the right way, because we do a pretty good job about it. And I think that's a testament to all the different committees and the members and the support we've been having as well. So hopefully we can continue doing that. So on that note, are we all content that we're happy for this to just progress in the way it is? No dissent? No, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lindsay, for bringing that to us again. And finally, the work plan, item number 9. So on this one, it's just to make sure that you're all content with the upcoming work plan. We've got the meetings in February and May pretty much scoped out, apart from spaces for some proactive scrutiny, which is probably going to be a cabinet paper or something like that, which comes up in time. And we have a briefing scheduled for the van life item, and that's on the 18th of March, which is one of our regular briefing sessions, which we've not been using that much recently. And hopefully that'll give us a chance for officers to update us on what information we have and what information we need, and what third parties and other groups we may want to invite into that as we're scoping out what we're doing. Lindsay.
Thanks. Yeah, just in relation to that van life item, Chair, that we've done a lot of work in scoping that, and we moved it on from the original scheduled date, and we've now moved to a point where, as you said, the officers want to bring a briefing because I think they feel that it's important that the committee has a good understanding of the data that they hold around it, the issue. And that's the date that they're able to bring it to us. So yeah, absolutely looking to see that the committee is happy with that. But another thing to raise around van life is at the ONS board on Monday, there was a discussion around a motion referred by council to the ONS board, and it touched on van life, and there was some discussion around where that item was at. And the ONS board agreed that they wanted to send a note to this committee to say that they still thought that that was important and urged that that be progressed. Obviously, that was on Monday. We haven't got a note published with the agenda or anything, but I just wanted to communicate that verbally to you so you were aware of the board's view with that.
Is it easy enough for me to just say noted? Thank you. And yeah, no, as they'll be able to see, we are progressing it. It's progressing slower than we would have liked, but actually I think we're going to end up with a far, far better scrutiny session than what we ever anticipated doing with that as well. And hopefully we'll see something come of that and become a pact or something which is part of council policy. So I think the delay is very, very much worth it in this case. The only other thing I wanted to raise in this item is the 3rd of December. We've got a briefing session scheduled as a regular one, and I was going to say that we should use this one and not use it as a briefing, but use it as a work planning session. If we can all come together on Teams and scope out the work plan for the remainder of next year, and also probably bring if we want to do any working groups or any in-depth scrutiny, as there's going to be a change of how that's done, we probably want to get our ducks in a row, so to speak, so we can take it to the chairs group and get it on the agenda there as well. Lindsay?
Sorry to keep coming in.
It's okay.
Yeah, Chair, in relation to that December date, that's not very far away. And I think what the intention was is that that could be a sort of a light touch work planning discussion around the items that are already on your work plan, because you have got them quite well populated for the next few meetings, but perhaps we can talk a bit more around the scope and, you know, make sure that you're really adding value by those pieces of work and the way that you approach them. In terms of an in-depth work planning session for the remainder of probably the council term, those are in the course of being planned, and we would envisage those being a bit later and into the new year, so that there's time to sort of go out to relevant officers and portfolio holders and get a really good understanding of what anything that might be coming up that you might want to schedule. So almost a two-stage approach to looking at your work plan, with this being a lighter touch thing in December.
Okay, thank you. Is everyone okay for a lighter touch thing in December? So it impacts less upon the run up to Christmas, which seems like it's around the corner at the moment. But that'll just be an online meeting as well. If everyone's happy and everyone's able to make themselves available for that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, on that note, I think that all that's left to do is close the meeting for this evening. Thank you all for being here, for everyone who came in and presented to us, for anyone who has stayed around and watched at home, for the public questions, and everyone else, and say good night. Thank you very much.